to take 2 minutes and 16 seconds and review the video, which is why we're here today. Let's show the video.
I'm scared. I'm just scared. Get over. Get over. I'm scared.
Mr. Greene was, to some degree, even though he had just finished leading police officers on a lengthy and a high-speed chase, his inclination at that particular point was to acquiesce to what the officers wanted.
Let me see your hands. Put your hands behind your back, bitch. Give me your fucking hands. Put your hands behind your back. Taser. Put your hands behind your back. Behind your back. You're about to get it again if you don't put your fucking hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. I'm sorry.
What's problematic for me is that Mr. Greene is now left on the ground, on his stomach, handcuffed in a prone position. And officers are trained throughout the United States that once there's a struggle of this nature, and the individual's handcuffed, that you need to push him off onto his side or get him in a sitting position so you can allow that breathing to be unimpeded by his own body weight. And that didn't happen for at least, based on my calculation, 9 minutes, where Mr. Greene was left alone. And then when he wasn't left alone and he tried to get over onto his side, another trooper pushed him down using his foot against the lower back and buttocks of Mr. Greene. And I didn't understand that. There was absolutely no reason for that. Under no circumstances should Mr. Greene have been drugged by his ankle shackles. That was malicious, sadistic, completely unnecessary. And the officer that did it's going to have to be held accountable.
Thank you very much. Once again, I'm Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League, and I'm proud to lead the National Urban League. But I am a native of Louisiana, a former member of the Louisiana State Senate, and I served 8 years as mayor of New Orleans. What happens in Louisiana is personal. It's where my family is. It's where my roots are. It's a place I deeply love. We're here today because we are shocked, outraged, repulsed, offended by the torture and death of a man who need not have died. That torture was carried out by Louisiana State troopers, sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution, who willfully, recklessly, and intentionally violated Mr. Greene's rights in a fashion that led to his death. Mr. Greene was killed by these state troopers. After seeing that video, no reasonable person could come to any other conclusion other than a crime has been committed by Louisiana State troopers. So today, in light of this, we're calling on the Louisiana State Police to immediately dismiss the officers involved in this incident and to arrest each of them and charge them with appropriate crimes. Mr. Greene's family has endured 2 years of pain. And what adds to the tragedy of this is that Louisiana State troopers sought to cover this up. They sought to create a narrative that Mr. Greene died in an automobile accident. They lied, and they lied. And those lies constitute perjury. And perjury is a crime. We call for all who have anything to do with the Louisiana State Police to take action immediately, to hold these officers accountable. They must be terminated and they must be arrested. It's indefensible that 2 years after Ronald Greene's death, not a single charge has been filed, and only one of the surviving troopers involved has faced any form of discipline. The release of the tape makes this case perfectly clear. As civil rights leaders, we will not rest. We will not rest. And we've written to the leader of the Louisiana State Police today to call on him to both terminate and arrest the offending officers. We've also written today to Attorney General Merrick Garland, asking him to expedite and put the full weight of the Department of Justice behind what we understand is an ongoing investigation into the actions of the Louisiana State Police in this instance. We also believe that it may be meritorious or it may be appropriate for the Department of Justice to conduct a further investigation of the actions and the practices of the Louisiana State Police. It is so crucial, so critical, that we not allow this case to be swept under the rug. Let me just say this. The trooper by the name of Corey York, who appears on the video dragging a face-down, handcuffed and shackled Greene, served a 50-hour suspension and has been returned to active duty. What an outrage. What an insult. What a violation of every single protocol when it comes to the standards by which officers should be held. Master Trooper Chris Hollingsworth, who is seen punching Greene and shocking him with a stun gun, died in a car accident hours after learning he would be fired. Trooper Dakota DeMoss, well, we don't know. We hear he faces termination over another excessive force incident that is unrelated to Greene's death. Lieutenant John Clary, who arrived on the scene shortly after the assault, who was there to oversee this, the supervising officer lied to investigators as to what happened and then denied the existence of his own body camera video for nearly 2 years. This is uncalled for. This is not what we rightfully expect in the 21st century. So today we are unified. I have also asked to meet with the head of the state police and other officials in Louisiana, the National Urban League, the Urban League of Louisiana, and each and every one of us will not rest. We stand with this grieving family. We stand with this community. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. It is time for these officers to be terminated and arrested and ultimately to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I will lend my voice and whatever power that I have and whatever voice that I have and whatever voice the National Urban League has to this cause for justice for Mr. Greene. We have several speakers this morning, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. We're going to begin first with Attorney Ron Haley, one of the lawyers who represents Mr. Greene's family. Attorney Haley.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your words of encouragement and support. 2 years is too long. It should not take a lawsuit. It should not take protest. It should not take leaks to the media for the leadership of this state to come forward and acknowledge publicly what happened to Ronald Greene. Make no mistake, Ronald Greene was murdered by the hands of the Louisiana State Police, May 10th, 2019. His case is the quintessential case as to why the George Floyd Policing Reform Act must be passed. It should never be okay that 2 years go by and a murder is covered up. It should never be okay that 2 years go by before body cam footage is released. And it should never be okay for a law enforcement agency to hide behind the guise of qualified immunity when they are acting in concert in such a horrendous crime. The callousness of these officers, the calmness in which this went down, makes one to believe, is this not the first time that this has happened? We know this is not the first time this has happened, because 3 weeks after this, troopers from Troop F cracked Aaron Bowman over the head with a flashlight over 15 times. Fortunately, he was alive to tell his story. That is why we're asking for federal oversight of the Louisiana State Police. They have proven that they cannot clean up themselves. They've proven they cannot investigate themselves. We're asking for any officer that put their hands on Ronald Greene is arrested, and any officer that participated in the cover-up of his murder is arrested 2 minutes after them. I thank you so much for the Urban League, for your platform, for helping elevate this issue that has been in the dark far too long. This is a moment right now for our state of Louisiana to get this right, and I only pray that we do.
Thank you very much, Attorney Haley. And I think we expect Lee Merritt to join. When he does, we will go to him at this time. Let me introduce my colleague, the leader of the Urban League of Louisiana, its president and CEO, Judy Reese-Morse. Judy.
Thank you. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Just 2 days ago, we took a moment to reflect on what has happened in the years since George Floyd's murder. In the midst of our reflection, we were faced with yet another barrage of brutal video footage. It's all too familiar and all too similar. We know that Ronald Greene died at the hands of those who were supposed to serve and protect him. And now here we are having to call for justice and accountability yet again. We are tired, as we know you all are, yet we know that change is both possible and it is absolutely necessary. We have no choice but to keep fighting, and that is exactly why the Urban League exists. The Urban League of Louisiana has been actively working toward creating a country and a state where African Americans are able to thrive. In the past year, Urban League of Louisiana has hosted virtual town halls to elevate the conversation about police reform. In response to Mr. Floyd's death, many organizations reached out seeking advice on how to equip themselves and their teams. Now we know many more of them will continue to reach out, both at the state level here in Louisiana and at the national Urban League level, to ask how to respond to this issue. The Urban League served on the Police Training, Screening, and De-escalation Task Force launched by the Louisiana State Legislature to address police accountability. And we know that there are bills moving through the Louisiana State Legislature as we hold this press conference regarding police reform and accountability. We urge the Louisiana State Legislature to pass this important legislation. Of course, as you've heard at the national level, this Urban League affiliate, along with 89 other affiliates across the United States of America, stand with National Urban League in support the passing of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. All of these efforts are meant to support and protect African Americans and all residents of Louisiana. So here we are 2 years after the brutal murder of Ronald Greene, still calling for accountability. Today, the Urban League of Louisiana is launching an online petition that calls for all troopers involved to be immediately terminated, all troopers involved to be arrested. You can sign the petition by going to urbanleaguela.org. As you heard our national president say, we will continue to advocate for criminal justice reform, promote bodies of work that speak to this issue, and we refer everyone to the National Urban League's 21 pillars redefining public safety and restoring community trust. This is not an impossible body of work. This is absolutely possible. It is absolutely necessary, and we know how to do it. We must show the will to do it. One way that everyone can support this is to sign our online petition and join us in the movement. Now I'd like to introduce you to some of the leaders, civil rights leaders in the state of Louisiana. We have been working together.
Judy,
Yes.
let's go to Lee Merritt because he's joined and we've only got a minute or two with
Thank
him.
you.
Lee, and then I'll come back to you to introduce the local leaders. Lee, are you with us?
I am here. And
Thank
I'm
you,
here with
Lee.
the family.
Look, thank you for joining, and let me recognize you and provide the floor to you now. Lee Merritt, who is representing the Greene family along with Mr. Haley.
Hey, good morning. And thank you all for taking some time out to speak with us. I'm actually wandering the halls of the legislators, so I'll probably need 2 minutes to get settled in the room before I can make statements. But thank you.
Okay, you
yielding the
take your
floor.
time. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you, Lee.
Okay.
Okay, Judy, go ahead.
Yes, let me introduce Alana Odoms, who is the Executive Director of the Louisiana ACLU. Alana?
Good morning, Judy, and thank you so much. Thank you, President Morial. It is my honor to be with you this morning. These troopers flout the United States Constitution. These troopers desecrate our founding documents, which herald that all people should be treated equally before the law. These troopers have no faith in the laws of this land, no faith in the court system and the judges, prosecutors, district and attorneys general who are elected and appointed to adjudicate criminal matters and to seek justice. In essence, they have no faith in our criminal legal system. Here is what Mr. Greene was entitled to pursuant to his constitutional rights. He was entitled to due process. He was entitled to counsel. He was entitled to his day in court and to a speedy trial. He was entitled to the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. The right to be secure in his persons, papers, and effects. The right to speak his mind without fear of retaliatory arrest. The right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment. The right to equal protection under the law. These are the guarantees of citizenship. The guarantees all but disappear when police officers become judge, jury, and executioner. Police officers, when they reasonably believe that someone has committed a crime, should usher people into safe contact with the court system, criminal legal system, where the individual's rights, as I have enumerated them above, kick in. When this constitutional process is hijacked and gives way to swift and predatory justice, which mirrors terror-based practices such as public lynchings, like what we saw with Mr. Ronald Greene, have begun to retreat back to our origins, the very ideology of policing in America, which we know to be slave patrols and police watch. Americans should know that on May 18th, 2021, we celebrated the 125th anniversary of Plessy versus Ferguson, a case which declared by a 7-1 vote the notion of separate but equal. Unfortunately, what we see with this kind of vigilante justice in the state of Louisiana, where officers make themselves judge, jury, and executioner, we have two systems of justice, which are wholly separate and wholly unequal. We know this because we've seen officers encounter threatening situations without taking lives. We hearken back to the insurrectionists who battered and bloodied Capitol Police and lived to tell the tales, for some to be arrested days, weeks, and months later, safely in their homes, resting and awaiting potential charges. We've got to stop these stops, these baseless, pretextual, racist stops, these traffic stops for minor infractions. We've got to stop law enforcement from having these kinds of interactions with our communities of color, because we know that officers use compliance as a litmus test for whether or not they should take a life. Stop. What do we want to see? We know that police officers cannot police themselves and they cannot hold themselves accountable. Louisiana has a higher police to resident ratio than any other place in the country. We have innumerable private security districts. We have state police, we have sheriffs, we have private security districts. We have far too many officers, and we have far too many officers who fail to observe the constitutional rights of citizens. We want a full-scale investigation of the Louisiana State Police with a look-back period. Why do we want a look-back period? Because we know that the officers and troopers who perpetrated this crime, this is not their first crime. This is not the first time that they've taken someone's life. And in order to seek justice, we must look at every case where these officers were involved, and we must look at how they behaved, each and every single case, no matter how far back that goes. We have to take into account that these officers are still on the police force, many of whom have not even received any sanction to date. And we are resoundingly affirming the calls that the families have made. The families are asking for these officers to be arrested. The families are asking for these officers to be charged with the appropriate crimes and the conspiratorial crimes that should come as a result of people who stood by and watched. We are also asking for the state of Louisiana to be on notice that qualified immunity is one of the significant barriers that prevents officers and government officials from being held accountable in court. We want to dismantle qualified immunity. There is a bill in the legislature which has the potential to do that. It requires serious amendment, but we have the ability to start that work. We should start it today. We should also look at the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. We are one of 13 states in the nation that has a Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. And what that does is it provides loopholes for police officers who harm and kill people. It requires that officers be given 30 additional days to wait, to collude, to get their stories together before they make any kind of statement around hurting or killing someone. And it requires or provides that disciplinary records don't have to be kept. We have to eliminate these loopholes. And finally, we want to look at the state of the statute of limitations in the state of Louisiana for Section 1983 cases. We are one of 3 states in the nation with a 1-year statute of limitations, which means that if you are harmed by police, you only have 1 year to vindicate your rights in court. And usually there are cover charges or pretextual charges that you are fighting, criminal charges that you are fighting simultaneously, which prevent you from fighting your constitutional rights. If we do not think about these policy and landscape changes and reform, we will not get to justice. I am confident, though, that when we march on the Capitol today, demanding accountability for this family and demanding the reform changes that I've enumerated here, I know that we will be on the right track to justice.
Thank you, Alana. Judy, thank you, Alana. I believe Lee's ready. Lee?
Thank you, Brother Morial. I'm here with Mona Harding, and she's going to have a chance to address you all directly, the mother of Ronald Greene. We are in the state capitol now, and we're meeting with Union Parish Prosecutor, Mr. Belton. We had a very specific reason for meeting with Mr. Belton because this crime occurred in his jurisdiction. And the Louisiana Constitution, as well as the United States Constitution, gives him the authority to make arrests of the men involved. We believe that those very specific arrests of York, Officer York, Officer DeMoss, Officer Clary are long overdue. And we wanted to hear specifically when these men would be held criminally accountable, beginning with a probable cause arrest, a presentation to a grand jury for indictment. At the state level, we know that there is a parallel investigation running with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And since we heard about this case in September, we have been continually deferred to the federal apparatus, but that's allowing Louisiana officials to shirk their responsibility of making an arrest immediately, of holding these men accountable immediately. We asked Mr. Belton, quite frankly and quite directly, was he ready to request that a judge sign a warrant for the arrest of the men involved in the crimes that are now, evidence of those crimes are now available in the public domain. It certainly has been turned over to his office. He indicated that the state police had still not yet turned over a complete file, and that the state police would be required to make the request for an arrest warrant. As you all know, that is not a legally sound excuse. The prosecutor is responsible for making a determination of whether or not probable cause exists to seek an arrest. And so we simply reject that. However, we are also encouraging the governor's office and the Louisiana State Police to go ahead and make the arrest as a start on the path to justice. No one has made that commitment to us so far. People are speaking obscurely that arrests are imminent, that we should trust the process, that we should rely on the federal government to move, that the state actors are also prepared to move, but it takes time. Most who make that statement seem to forget that the time has been running for over 2 years now. 747 days is where we are since the murder of Ronald Greene, and cautioning the community or this family that this process takes time is no longer an excuse that we're willing to accept. So we're asking you all to join us and use your platform, the influence of this great organization, the many members who have committed to justice for Ronald Greene, to join us in a very specific demand that these men be arrested post haste today, at the latest this week. This family has come here with a very specific commitment of seeing these men held criminally accountable, and everyone has offered them platitudes and sympathy and commitment to the process, but no one has delivered any specific action. These men still remain unmolested in their homes, without indictment, without arrests, without warrants. We believe in equal protection under the law, that all citizens enjoy the same constitutional protections. And we know that if a white citizen, if a fellow police officer, if the governor's child had met the same end that Ronald Greene had met, there would be action by now. And it is extremely frustrating from this office to know the law, to know how the structure works, to have people in authority with us, that they both have the authority and the legal imperative to take action, but simply to refuse to in the interest of time and a commitment to the process. And so it's been so far a frustrating morning for Ms. Mona Harding and her family. And I want to give her a chance both to thank you all for joining her on her very specific mission, but also engage her on how we can get the outcomes that she's seeking.
Thank you, Lee.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, Ms. Harding.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Go ahead.
I'd like to let you know that I am so appreciative. I speak for all my family, all throughout the Ron Greene family, that please, we need help. We need someone's attention to help to move these mountains, because it's just like Lee said, the course of time and what we repeatedly hear, it's so disrespectful. Well over 2 years. I don't know how I can say it any louder. What we see, what we know, and to get justice for what they did to Ronnie, it doesn't seem even rational to even speak any more of this because of what we know, what we have on hand, the politics of it. Why do we have to have politics on murdering a man? I understand. I understand the corruption and who has to stay alive, who has to save neck and let the others take the blame. But I understand all that. But it should not be. It just should not be. No one should be above the law. Should not be above the law. And this is what we're fighting, the whole state of Louisiana, to keep those that we're speaking of above the law. We need someone to be arrested. We need them to be indicted. We didn't come all this way just for an offer, just to let everyone else slide. It's so inhumane. It's unbelievable. But I thank you all. Thank you.
Mark, you're muted.
Ms. Hardin, let me thank you for your courage and for taking time to spend a few minutes with us today. I want to express my prayers our sympathies on your loss. I want to express our commitment to work with your lawyers who are excellent in this quest. We are going to build broad support. We have civil rights support from Louisiana, and we are going to build broad support necessary to hold the officials accountable who are responsible for holding their employees accountable, and the system accountable for ensuring that justice is done. This is a reprehensible, gut-turning, unnecessary, unconstitutional, torture that took place on the roads of the state of Louisiana. And we will not be silent, and we will not be compromised by political considerations in continuing to call for justice to be done from Baton Rouge to Union Parish to Washington, D.C. Whatever it takes and whatever it requires, our voices are going to be consistent and our voices are going to be loud. And I want all the people in the media to understand this is the beginning. I heard about this incident 2 years ago. COVID intervened. When I saw the video, it literally caused me to just be unable to sleep because it was so reprehensible and so hateful. And that could be any one of our family members.
Right, that's right.
And we know Union Parish. We understand Union Parish. We understand some of the special challenges of North Louisiana. But we are all unified today in joining in saying it is time for these officers to, 1, be fired, 2, be arrested. It's time for there to be a complete top to bottom, if you will, investigation, examination, and review of the actions of the Louisiana State Police. It is time for these officers to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and for justice to be done in a court of law. It took lots of pressure and a sustained movement to see to it that George Floyd received justice in the case in Minnesota. We don't have a Keith Ellison in Louisiana. We don't have a Keith Ellison in Louisiana. We understand that and we know that. But we're going to hold everyone accountable. And so thank you for your courage and your strength and your power. And we are just going to stand with you. I'm going to turn it back to Judy, who will introduce the other leaders who are going to speak today. And Lee and Ms. Harden, we understand if you have to leave, we'll be speaking to you soon. But we want to thank you. If you can remain with us, of course, we appreciate that. But we will absolutely be in touch on next steps. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Harden.
I just want to say, this whole thing started with the state of Louisiana and their narrative of what happened. And we understand 2 years later where we're at, but they also control the narrative of how this will end. Because if it's not corrected, if it's not fixed, it'll just continue. It's not about my son, only about my son. It's about if we don't correct this, and everyone that we speak of has control of this, it'll just continue. And everyone will be back in the same position that we all are in now. Change the mothers, change the families, but we have to change this. But everyone that we're speaking of, everyone here today, in our journey, my family's journey, has control of how this story ends, and they can make it right. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate you. Judy?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harden. Thank you, Mr. Merritt, Ms. Harden. Please know that the Urban League of Louisiana and many, many people across the state of Louisiana stand with you. You're so eloquent and your words are so powerful, so heartfelt. We are with you. We are with you. We are with you. I'd like to go to one of those leaders, Mr. Eugene Collins, who is the president of the NAACP Baton Rouge branch, to share a few remarks. Eugene?
Yes, ma'am. And I know these great attorneys have spoke to the details of this, and it's great to hear Ms. Mona speaking absolute transparency, which is something that the Louisiana State Police has never provided to her. We got to go back to the inception of this case. We got to remember that originally, Louisiana State Police said that Mr. Ronald Greene, and I say Mr. Ronald Greene because we need to put a little respect on his name. Originally, the Louisiana State Police said that he had died in a car crash. That was the original story. And then even after that, we know for a fact that the Louisiana State Police has never done the right thing by this case. All information that all of the statements that have come out of Louisiana State Police has been in large part due to information being either leaked or information winding up in the media. The Louisiana State Police has not shown that they have the ability to do the right thing by themselves yet. But let's keep it real for a second. Louisiana is not new to these type of tragedies. Louisiana is not new to having Black men cause bodily harm on the side of the road by white men. And we got to remember that Chief Tony back in the 1800s, he says, Chief Taney in the 1800s said, slaves and their descendants have no rights in which the white man was bound to respect. That's exactly what we're seeing here in Louisiana. Louisiana, we need to realize that all the eyes around the world are on us to make sure that we just have good human decency. Receiving 50 hours of discipline for dragging a man is just wild to think that somebody thought that was good enough. And to know that this case took 2 years and people saw that video and still did nothing about it, didn't act, that's atrocious. And the Louisiana State Police should be accountable. So we stand here as the NAACP with these great bodies, with these attorneys, with this family, being sure that these folks are held accountable, because this ain't nothing new to Louisiana. Black men being pulled over by white men and beaten on the side of the road ain't nothing new to Louisiana. One could even make the argument that folks just switch uniforms. And that's something that we're tired of here. So either the system will change it, or we'll continue to push and apply that force that's needed to make sure that these things are changed.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for those powerful words and for your leadership over these 2 years. I'd like to now turn to Lindsay Friedman. Lindsay is the ADL South Central Associate Regional Director. The Anti-Defamation League is a partner at the National Urban League level, as well as at the state level here in Louisiana. Lindsay, we're glad that you're with us. Please share your remarks.
Good morning, and thank you for including ADL in this important call to action. 1 year after the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers, we are now calling for transparency and justice for the brutal killing of Ronald Greene at the hands of Louisiana police officers who failed to render aid and attempted to cover up Mr. Greene's death for 474 days. While we await the FBI's investigation, we call on the state police to immediately fire the officers involved in Mr. Greene's death and its cover-up. We call on Governor Edwards to implement independent oversight of the agency as a whole and a fully transparent investigation of this homicide. From Breonna Taylor to Dante Wright to Ronald Greene and far too many more, it is past time for our country to reckon with the very real trauma inflicted by police violence. ADL renews our call for Louisiana and the rest of the nation to implement real change to tackle systemic racism, reimagine public safety, and create transformational change to ensure justice and fair treatment for Black and other marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Again, we want to remind everyone that the National Urban League and the Urban League of Louisiana, along with the partners that you've heard from today, as well as others, have created an online petition. You can sign that petition by going to the Urban League of Louisiana's website, urbanleaguela.org. The petition is there. It is going to be moving across the country. This is not just limited to Louisiana. Anyone across the United States and around the world can sign, and we have learned will be signing this petition, calling for the immediate arrest and firing of every trooper involved having anything to do with Mr. Greene's death. I also want to acknowledge State Representative Ted James, who is the chair of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus. We wanted him to join us today, but he is in legislative session and not able to participate. He represents the Legislative Caucus and has spoken out very powerfully, representing the caucus on this matter. I want to turn it now back to either Mark or to Tess, who will then see if we have any questions from me.
Yeah, before we go to Tess, thank you very much, Judy, and thank you to all. I did want to also acknowledge that I communicated this morning with Congressman Troy Carter, who has a great interest in this, and I'll be speaking to him again later today or tomorrow to bring him up to speed, and from his new position, what he can do to ensure that the Justice Department does everything in its power to ensure justice for Mr. Greene. With that, we're going to go to Tess Kandori. Tess is going to moderate the questions through the chat. Tess?
Hello. At the moment, we have no questions in the Q&A box. I think I just want to invite any members of the media or anyone who has a question, please type it in the Q&A box. We'll give you a minute to do that if you would like. Chanel Brown asks, what's the key action step that we're calling for?
Okay, let me be absolutely clear. What we're calling for is, number one, the arrest of these officers. Number two, the termination of these officers. And certainly the arrest should lead to a full and vigorous criminal prosecution of these officers in a state system or in the federal system or in both. We believe that an arrest, that the videotape includes facts which go beyond the standard of probable cause. And the state police have the power. They are a police agency. The district attorney in Union Parish has the power to seek an arrest warrant. There are many people who can conduct or carry out an arrest. So we want these officers arrested and terminated. And we will have, you've heard a number of other things today: independent oversight, pattern and practice investigations, full and complete prosecutions. This is not the last time we'll be speaking to you all as we develop our efforts to ensure justice for Mr. Greene. This is only the beginning of the real effort by this coalition to aggressively and assertively join the work that Ms. Hardin, attorneys Merritt and Haley have now carried out for 474 days in seeking justice for Ronald Greene.
Mason Robb asks, has the Urban League or NAACP been calling for action prior to this point, and what has the official response been?
Let me defer to Judy, because the Urban League of Louisiana has issued statements previously on this case. Judy, and then maybe our NAACP colleague can respond as well.
Sure. The Urban League of Louisiana has joined other civil rights organizations to issue a statement about what it is that we want to see. Today, of course, we are asking for more, and we are staying close to this issue in partnership with other organizations to make sure that there is accountability, there is visibility. We know that it is too late for the action to be swift. We're past that point, but it is not too late for there to be accountability. And that is what the Urban League of Louisiana is going to continue to push for. We've got people across the state of Louisiana who work with the Urban League in our policy and social justice and advocacy efforts. They are with us, and we know that there will be many more. We will remain vigilant and continue to press on what it is that we want to see. And you've heard that call: immediate termination of every trooper involved in Mr. Greene's incident, and the arrest of every trooper involved.
Eugene?
Yes, sir. And I'd like to thank the Urban League for allowing me to be a part of this today as well. But we made this act over a year ago, actually, to arrest these officers and to fire them as well. And at that time, we saw a change, overhaul change in Louisiana State Police leadership, from appointing of the 3 first African-American Black majors in the history of the state in Louisiana State Police, as well as the appointment of Mr. Lamar Davis as Colonel of Louisiana State Police, who replaced Colonel Reeves. But we have consistently made the same acts over and over again, and this administration has never listened. So it's time that we pushed a little harder and ask for a little more, and continue to ask for the arrest of these officers. That is what's just in this situation. We all saw the video. This is not a hard decision, but we have consistently made these acts over the last year. And even outside of that, we have been on planning calls, discussing actions and how we can move forward, along with our Urban League partners, as well as the ACLU, as well as the ADL, and a couple other groups. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but this has been a consistent act from all of our perspectives for well over a year.
Chanel Brown asks, do you see connections between Ahmaud Arbery and this case, where killings happen under the radar until a video surfaces? And what does this say about the America we live in?
So let me offer this observation. Since the death of Trayvon Martin, the untimely death of Trayvon Martin nearly a decade ago, many of us in the civil rights community began this effort for departments to make body cameras and dash cameras mandatory. The fruit of that effort is what we see today, is now these incidents do not turn into a he say, she say, finger pointing exercise. These cameras and this technology has allowed the entire world to see what happens in these encounters. It is clear that the death of George Floyd, captured by a courageous teenage girl, young woman by the name of Darnella Frazier, combined with various body cams from the officers, created an opportunity for all to see the incident that led to George Floyd's murder from beginning to end. This technology is